Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, reading today from Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 21, Text 12. Sarvatra skhalita, no, Sarvatra skhalita, no, Sarvatra skhalita desha, okay, yeah, I second guessed the meter. Sarvatra skhalita desha, Saptadvipaika dandadrik, Anyatra brāhmaṇa kulad, Anyatra achyutta gotrataha, Sarvatra skhalita deshaha, Saptadvipaika dandadrik, Anyatra brāhmaṇa kulad, Anyatra achyutta gotrataha, Sarvatra skhalita deshaha, Saptadvipaika dandadrik, Anyatra brāhmaṇa kulad, Anyatra achyutta gotrataha, Sarvatra skhalita deshaha, Saptadvipaika dandadrik, Anyatra brāhmaṇa kulad, Anyatra achyutta gotrataha, Sarvatra skhalita deshaha, Saptadvipaika dandadrik, Anyatra brāhmaṇa kulad, Anyatra achyutta gotrataha, Sarvatra skhalita deshaha, Saptadvipaika dandadrik, Anyatra brāhmaṇa kulad, Anyatra achyutta gotrataha. Mataji's. Sarvatra skhalita deshaha, Saptadvipaika dandadrik, Anyatra brāhmaṇa kulad, Anyatra achyutta gotrataha. Sarvatra, everywhere. Askhalita, irrevocable. Adeshaha, order. Saptadvipa, 7 islands. Eka, 1. Dandadrik, the ruler who holds the scepter. Anyatra, except brāhmaṇa kulat, brāhmanas and saintly persons. Anyatra, except achyutya gotrataha, descendants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vaiṣṇavas. Translation. Mahārāja Pṛthu was an unrivaled king and possessed the scepter for ruling all the 7 islands on the surface of the globe. No one could disobey his irrevocable orders but the saintly persons, the brāhmanas, and the descendants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Vaiṣṇavas. Purport. Saptadvipa refers to the 7 great islands or continents on the surface of the globe: Asia, Europe, Africa, North America, South America, Australia, and Oceania. In the modern age, people are under the impression that during the Vedic period, or the prehistoric ages, America and many other parts of the world had not been discovered, but that is not a fact. Pṛthu Mahārāja ruled over the world many thousands of years before the so-called prehistoric age, and it is clearly mentioned here that in those days not only were all the different parts of the world known, but they were ruled by one king, Mahārāja Pṛthu. The country where Pṛthu Mahārāja resided must have been India, because it is stated in the 11th verse of this chapter that he lived in the tract of land between the river Ganges and Yamuna. This tract of land, which is called Brahmavarta, consists of what is known in the modern age as portions of Punjab and northern India. It is clear that the kings of India once ruled all the world and that their culture was Vedic. The word askalita indicates that orders by the king could not be disobeyed by anyone in the entire world. Such orders, however, were never issued to control saintly persons or the descendants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. The Supreme Lord is known as Achyuta, and Lord Krishna is addressed as such by Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, Senayor ubhayor madhye ratham sthapaya me chuta. Achyuta refers to one who does not fall because he is never influenced by the modes of material nature. When a living entity falls down to the material world from his original position, he becomes Achyuta, which means that he forgets his relationship with Achyuta. Actually, every living entity is a part and parcel, or a son, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When influenced by the modes of material nature, a living entity forgets this relationship and thinks in terms of different species of life. But when he again comes to his original consciousness, he does not observe such bodily designations. This is indicated in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, text 18, by the words Pandita Samadarshinaha. Material designations create differentiation in terms of caste, color, creed, nationality, etc. Different gotras, or family designations, are distinctions in terms of the material body. But when one comes to Krishna consciousness, he immediately becomes one of the Achyuta Gotra, or descendants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus becomes transcendental to all considerations of caste, creed, color, and nationality. Pṛthu Mahārāja has no control over the Brāhmaṇa kul, which refers to the learned scholars in Vedic knowledge, nor over the Vaiṣṇavas, who are above the consideration of Vedic knowledge. It is therefore said, Arche Vishnav Shiladhir Gurushu Narmatir Vaishnave Jati Buddhir Vishnorva Vaishnavanam Kalimala Mathane Pada Tirtembu Buddhihi Shri Vishnor Namni Mantre Sakala Kalusha He Shabda Samanya Buddhir Vishnav Sarveshvareshe Tad Ittara Samadhir Yasya Va Naraki Saha. One who thinks the deity in the temple to be made of wood or stone, who thinks of the spiritual master in the disciplic succession as an ordinary man, who thinks the Vaishnava in the Achyuta Gotra to belong to a certain caste or creed, or who thinks of Charanamrita or Ganges water as ordinary water, is taken to be a resident of hell. Padma Purana. From the facts presented in this verse, it appears that people in general should be controlled by a king until they come to the platform of Vaiṣṇavas and brāhmaṇas, who are not under the control of anyone. Brahmana refers to one who knows Brahman, or the impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth, and a Vaiṣṇava is one who serves the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Soyam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jigatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratashe Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaiṣṇavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, very nice purport from Srila Prabhupada. There's a few things that can be picked up on here that I think are interesting to be discussed, although, as I often like to make the point, even if the purport is one sentence, Prabhupada will have enough that you can talk for weeks and weeks and weeks on it, right? Just recently, I've been reading through On the Way to Krishna, right? And I was taking notes, and as I was reading On the Way to Krishna, I was like, I was writing in my notebook, and I was writing notes, you know, I was just finding all of this stuff, and then I realized that I sort of spent, you know, my hour of reading, I spent doing that, and I realized I only got 2 pages in, you know. I think when you actually sit down, because sometimes we read because we want to finish Prabhupada's books, right? Everyone wants to say, yeah, I finished Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah, 3 times. Yeah. Yeah. What can I say? I'm an impressive person, you know. We want to do this, right? But when we actually sit with Prabhupada's books, right? I was thinking, because On the Way to Krishna, I'm in no rush to finish this book, right? It's like this big, right? And so I was really taking my time. And when I was taking my time, I was thinking, I can't move on to the next page. Each sentence that Prabhupada is writing, this direction, that direction, right? We've all had this experience before, right? Actually, we think this when we read Bhagavatam in our own time. Sorry, I don't know, last week I talked about reading Bhagavatam. I'm talking about it again this week, but when we sit down and read Bhagavatam, you know, we go through next purport, like that, right? But when we prepare for Bhagavatam class and we sit down with the purport, we realize, wow, there's this, there's that, right? So when we sit down and digest Srila Prabhupada's books, there's so much there. Ocean of nectar. So anyways, this purport though is one that even if we speedily go through, we will not have enough time to cover everything. But Prabhupada makes some interesting points. I'll discuss maybe a little bit about this concept of the global Vedic culture, because it's interesting, right? It seems to fly against some of the understandings we have through history and science, right? How the whole world's ruled by this Mahārāja Pṛthu. What does Prabhupada say? Pṛthu Maharaj ruled over the world many thousands of years before the so-called prehistoric age, right? In the modern age, people are under the impression that during the Vedic period or prehistoric ages, America and many other parts of the world had not been discovered, right? There's a few interesting things to be said, right? One is, well, these places were obviously discovered. Why? Because there were living entities there, right? If there are living entities there, then they are discovered. We have this assumption. All of these forms of history and science, they're developed in the Western world, right? And they developed with the idea that the Western world is a center, right? And so they'll say, oh, America was undiscovered until 1600s, I think America was colonized, right? So they'll say it was undiscovered until the 1600s. But people were living there before, right? We see here in Australia, what is it? The indigenous Australian community is the oldest continuously surviving culture, at least. That's what they say, right? 40,000 years, correct? Right? That's according to historical estimates, right? Prabhupada is saying it must go much longer, right? So, people have been around well into this prehistoric eras. And if people are there, well, where did they come from, right? Clearly there's at least some form of connection. Clearly there's at least some form of coherence. If the living entities are there, then it is discovered, right? If I'm running around the temple and I can't find Manakrit Prabhu, I'm really looking for him because I need some sadhu sangha. I'm really desperate, right? I need the association of a pure Vaishnava. And I can't find Prabhu, right? Does that mean where the room where Prabhu is in, it doesn't exist? Because I don't know it, Manakrit Prabhu doesn't exist anymore. The room he's in doesn't exist. No. Just because I don't know somebody's in that room doesn't mean they're not in that room, right? Doesn't mean that it's not discovered. It just means it's discovered perhaps by someone else. Perhaps I actually know what room he's in and I've forgotten. Just because I've forgotten, does that mean he's no longer in the room? The room is undiscovered? No. And so it's the same with all of these things. Just because his knowledge was lost, just because his understanding is lost, does not mean that therefore it is brand new. It does not mean that therefore we can claim that these things are forgotten. So in the same way, all of these continents, they're connected, right? In this prehistoric Vedic culture. And of course people say, what? And their culture was Vedic, right? How can we say this, right? The cultures are all different. We look at the ancient cultures, and to some degree, the cultures are similar, right? You look ancient Egypt, they kind of wore their own dhotis, right? The ancient Greeks, they wore their own dhotis, right? All these different things, but you see, everyone's wearing some sort of robes. They're all engaged in some sort of demigod worship, no matter which culture, right? People will say, well, the Greeks, they descended from the Aryans, da-da-da-da-da. But I don't think the ancient Egyptians did, to my knowledge. I could be wrong. And yet they're engaged in demigod worship, right? Which is a sign of Vedic culture, actually, right? So we see that there seems to be some similarities, and yet there are a lot of differences. So how can we say it's one Vedic culture? The explanation I like, that I heard, is it's a bit like in this day and age, the whole world, less and less, but the whole world is still, we can say, covered in American culture. No matter where you go, you can expect, at the very least, there'll be some people who are speaking English, right? In the whole world, no matter where you go, there'll be people who, have heard of maybe Harry Potter, right? Or something along the lines of this, right? No matter where you go, you'll find cinema halls at least, right? It's funny, people talk about international global cinema, right? But cinema itself is developed in the Western world, right? People will say we should diversify and we should watch movies from other countries, and it was good. I mean, if you want to watch movies, go ahead, right? Or watch them from wherever. But we have to think, right? The movie itself is a Western invention, so how international is it, right? It's not the local way of expressing things. But in this way, we see American culture spread all over the world, actually, right? Western American culture is everywhere, right? In the same way, the Vedic culture is present everywhere. It doesn't mean that everyone was, speaking Prakrit, right? It doesn't mean that everyone was tying their dhotis, in between their legs, at the back and then folded in the front, 3 pleats like that. Doesn't mean that. But what it means is that this one hegemonic culture was present. This is at least my understanding. That is how we can understand. There's all of this diversity, but in the same way that American culture became so influential, for good or bad reason, more bad, but for the same reason, that in the same way that this American culture is influential, so too the Vedic culture, right? So in this way we see, perhaps not so much evidence, but I think there's something also interesting. We see here that Prabhupada uses the word, and then we'll talk about something a little less dry, but Prabhupada uses the word prehistoric, right? And prehistory is interesting because I think the word prehistoric indicates something. History is many things. In university, I did a unit on, well, I didn't do, I did lots of units on history and the methodology of history, right? And people actually debate what history is, what history can achieve. But prehistory, this means the time that can't really be measured by the historical method, right? So people will say, oh, well, there's no historical evidence for this, right? There's no historical evidence for anything prehistoric, right? So they'll say there's no archaeological evidence, but these things, they happened so long ago. If you take all of the fossils from an old enough period, you can probably fit them in a box this big, right? Now, I'm not saying, therefore, that scientific theories are bad. I'm a little bit progressive in this department, right? I think actually most scientific theories are good explanations for what evidence we have. But what evidence do we have, right? Not much. And even if we had a lot of evidence, will we ever be able to know? I, a few days ago, had an apple for breakfast. I can tell you that's a fact. I will not be able to prove it to any of you, right? You're going to have to take my word for it, right? I can't prove to you that I had an apple a few days ago. I did, mind you. but I can't prove it, right? So we have this idea, if we can't prove it, then it definitely doesn't happen, right? But how can you prove anything from 3 days ago? Forget then thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, right? What little evidence do we have? And even if we had lots of evidence, right? I might give you a receipt of the time I bought apples a week ago, right? I might show you my alarms that said I got up in time for breakfast that morning, right? I can show you all of these things, but you will never know for sure whether I picked up that apple and I ate it. We are so confident with our knowledge, but why? We have no reason to be as confident with our knowledge as we are. So in the same way, prehistory, right? So Prabhupada is very nicely saying, he's clarifying, he's saying that we don't know, but I know, right? And then he's informing us as to the history of this world. And we see this today. Prabhupada, he would critique all of the scientists who are saying that maybe there's no life on Mars, there's no life here, there's no life there. Just like the people who are saying there's no other continents, right? We don't know it, we don't understand it, so it doesn't exist. But the Vedic literature does not tell us about a dead world. The Vedic literature does not tell us about a world that is dead and empty and jada. It tells us about a world that is filled with life, teeming with life. Life is the foundation of all existence, right? Life is everywhere. Everything is living, breathing, conscious. This is the world the Vedas tell us about. And so, if they ever manage to do the right karma kanda activities to go to Mars, if they manage to do them, they'll discover it to be teeming with life as well. So we see the nature of the living entity is what? It is chutta, fallible, not infallible, right? And this is frustrating for us, isn't it? It's so frustrating. We sit down, maybe we sat down this morning, we're chanting our rounds, right? I remember I was talking to Krishna Rupa Mataji, the disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and I remember she was saying, some mornings you finish your rounds, and then you go on with your day, and then you think to yourself, wait, did I chant my rounds today or not? You think, am I remembering yesterday or am I remembering today, right? We've all experienced this before, right? We think, my counters are full, but well, is that from yesterday or have I? And you think, how attentive are we if we can't remember a single of our 16 rounds? So we're chutta, right? We experience our own infallibility. We experience, not exactly at the standard I wish I could be, right? Famous saying in the Bible, right? The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, right? I do the things I do not want to do, and I don't do the things I want to do. This is the nature of the living entity. And what do we feel when we experience this? When we experience our nature as chutta, right? What do we experience? We become so disappointed. We become so upset with ourselves, right? We think, I wish I could do better, right? And then we think, I'm so useless, and then we get really angry, right? We get angry at ourselves, right? And then we become discouraged in bhakti. And we think, maybe bhakti isn't for me, right? This is all too hard. Like this, right? And then what do we feel? We feel shame. Don't we feel shame, right? My rounds aren't good. My reading is not so good. I tried reading Bhagavatam, I couldn't get past Canto 2, right? We feel all of these things. And we think it's good to feel these things. We think it's good, I should have high, high standards. But actually it's not so good, right? And the reason why it's not good is not because it's, mentally healthy or whatever. I mean, that's a discussion for someone else to have. You can go to a Mahārāja Pṛthu retreat or something for those sort of things. That's all important, but not exactly the point I want to make. I actually want to make a heavier point, make people feel even worse. The reason why we feel so bad, right? Because we do feel terrible, don't we? Right? I get distracted by this thing, I remember sometimes when I walk to university, sometimes, especially on Ekadashi, right? I'm thinking, Ekadashi, I should be thinking about Krishna constantly. And I walk past, from Redfern Station to Sydney University, there's all these cafes, right? And I'll walk past the cafe, even if there's meat inside, I sometimes get so hungry, I smell it and I think, that smells really good, actually. I would, I sort of look at it and I think, I wouldn't mind eating that, that would be better than some, fruit and buckwheat, right? So I think like that. And then what do we think afterwards? Oh, I meant to be thinking about Krishna. I'm so fallen. I'm so degraded. And then we think, oh, so ashamed, a terrible condition. But, this is very bad. Because this emerges from our pride. This is actually our ahankar that produces these thoughts. Right? We want to think, I'm so humble, I'm so fallen, I'm so degraded. And then the moment you have a degraded thought, you think, oh, that's not me. I'm too pure to think this, right? This is the job of the ahankar, right? The ahankar is there to create a false identity. And the suffering we have in this material world, all the suffering we have in this material world, is when the false identity of the ahankar does not align with reality, right? When the ahankar and our true conditioning don't line up, then we suffer. And so we suffer so much when we realize we are not perfect, right? Because we think we're perfect, right? In a humble state of mind, it's not that we would think, okay, let me break a Kadashi then. Let me go have this sandwich. No, in a humble state of mind, we would think, oh, here is a bad thought because I'm actually the most fallen, right? This is what you'd expect from me. Now let me keep on going, and by the mercy of the Vaiṣṇavas, maybe one day I'll stop. And then you just keep on going with your existence, right? If we actually believed it when we went, oh, I'm the dust of your lotus feet, Prabhu, We do the humility Olympics, right? Oh no, Prabhu, I'm the dust of that dust. Oh no, Prabhu, in my next lifetime, I'll be able to be the dust of that dust. And then one day when we realize we're not Namacharya, Srila Haridas Thakur, we're like, oh, what's this? This can't be true, right? So actually these guilt and shame that we feel, so much of it is born from pride. Our pride. I'm such a pure devotee already. I remember once I was talking to one boy. I was like, he was asking me some advice, and then he said, Prabhu, when will I become an Uttamadhikari? And I said, worry about becoming a Kanishtadhikari first, Prabhu. So we see this, right? We make such a big deal of humility. But when we fail in bhakti, when we are not successful, then we really get to see how humble we are, right? We think humility is we do something well in bhakti and then we're like, oh, this is all Guru Maharaj is messy. That's not humility. Humility is messing up and thinking, you know what? This is exactly the sort of thing I would do. Does this make sense? Bit of a heavy point, but sorry. So this is our pride speaking when we become uncomfortable with the fact we are chutta. But we should feel very comfortable. Srila Prabhupada himself is saying it. We are the fallible category of existence. We make mistakes. Our job is to accept that and then keep on trying not to make mistakes, right? It is not that we should become complacent, not that we should become lazy. Radhanath Swami Maharaj, he says a story of once when he was in Vrindavan, he was staying with one sadhu, right? And this sadhu, he would sleep out in the grass every night, right? So Maharaj, he was feeling very inspired. He said, oh, I'll stay with this sadhu as well, right? And then he said, but Maharaj, Radhanath Maharaj was saying to the sadhu, he was saying, but Maharaj, at night, don't the snakes come out in Vrindavan? And then the sadhu said, yes, but Krishna will protect us. And Radhanath Maharaj was thinking, wow, Sharanagati, right? So they both stayed together. But then, as the night came closer and closer, Maharaj, he saw this sadhu, he was there with a walking stick, right? And then Maharaj said, oh, I've never seen you use a walking stick before. And then the sadhu, he said, oh yeah, it's to chase the snakes away, right? Then Maharaj got confused and he said, but I thought Krishna would protect us. And then the sadhu said, yes, but we have to do our part as well. So it is not that we should think I am in this fallible condition. I'm reliant on Krishna. Therefore what to do, I won't chant my rounds. Therefore what to do, mode of goodness, mode of ignorance or whatever, It's not that. It's not that we turn around in the opposite direction and we think I'm so helpless, right? We accept we are going to make so many mistakes because we just really aren't that great. We actually should mean it when we say we are the most fallen. We actually just aren't so great. But then with that we keep on going. We do our part and rely on the mercy of Guru and Gauranga. Because this pride is the end of all spiritual knowledge. Srila Prabhupada very famously writes in Canto 1 of Srimad Bhagavatam, this Kali Yuga began when pride entered into the hearts of the brāhmaṇas, right? And what do we see in the purport, Srila Prabhupada? He so nicely discusses the nature of material designations, right? Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, when his brahmacharis started getting married, right? At the beginning of the movement, he's recruiting brahmacharis, and then as the years go on, some of them decided brahmachari ashram wasn't for them, and they started getting married. Saraswati Thakur, he would release like an encyclical, sort of like newsletter, if you will. And in it, he expressed his deep disappointment. He was like, oh, come on, guys, like, let's do this, let's go all the way, stay in saffron, right? But then he said, I'm even more disappointed. Why? Because I'm even more disappointed that those of you who did decide to get married all got married in your own caste communities. It's very interesting, very radical. This is over 100 years ago. Saraswati Thakur, he's saying, I'm very disappointed. Not only have you left the ashram, right? Not only have you done this, but you've fallen completely into the bodily identification mindset of thinking, I will only marry someone from the same caste, same community as me. And Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, he actually writes, he says, that person who truly believes in my teachings, that person who truly has confidence in what I'm saying, that person will have the bravery to not bring these bodily designations in, but simply marry someone on the virtue of them being a Vaishnava. This is what Saraswati Thakur said. This is interesting, right? There was not much concern for caste, community, any of these things. And yet, we see even these days, people say, oh, this person, Brahmin family, right? This family, that family. Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada did not like this. Now Srila Prabhupada did not like this. This vision is completely contrary to the Krishna conscious understanding of reality. Our dear Haridas Thakur, right? Oh no. Yeah, our dear Haridas Thakur, right? Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur. I often like to make the point, right? Namacharya. Why is he Namacharya? Does anyone want to guess? Why do we call Haridas Thakur Namacharya? Oh, everyone wants to go. Chanting 3 lakhs a day. That's the conventional answer, and that's a correct answer actually, but I want to go a little deeper, right? I'm going to show another answer. Is that what you were going to say as well, Mataji? Yep. So, okay, this is similar, and what were you going to say, Prabhu? The same thing. So, we think of this, right? He's always chanting 3 lakhs, right? This is described. Navadvip Dham Mahatmya, Chaitanya Charitamrita. All the Shastras, they keep making the point. 3 lakhs chanting, right? Constantly absorbed in Harinam. But there's so many people who are chanting. Were the associates of Mahaprabhu also not chanting so much, right? Were they not engaged so much in the chanting of the holy name? It's correct. He chanted a lot. And that is why we call him Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur. He was able to preach, this is also important, he was able to preach the glories of the holy name, therefore he's Nam Acharya. Yes? This is getting warmer, and then is it? I don't know either. So what we see is this is correct. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur. When the Brahmins would come, he wouldn't be able to walk inside. Haridas Thakur, who is he? Who is he the incarnation of? Lord Brahma, right? Lord Brahma built what temple famously in Jagannath Puri? He built the main one. He built the Jagannath temple, right? He built the Jagannath temple, and yet when he went to Puri, they didn't let him in. And what did he say? Did Haridas Thakur say, hey, I actually built this temple? No, he accepted it and he stood next to the Murti of Garuda, right? And he would have darshan outside, standing next to Garuda, and he would see Jagannath there. Haridas Thakur is Namacharya, yes, because he's chanting all the time. Yes, because he's getting everyone to accept the holy name. But he is Namacharya because Tranadapi Sunichena Tarorapi Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadaharihi. The only qualification Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave for chanting kirtan is not that you have to wear a raw silk dhoti, not that you have to wear Radha Kuntilak, not that you have to do alaps until the cows come home. The only qualification Shri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave. And Sankirtan, kirtan is Chaitanya Shrishti. The Chaitanya Charitamrita says it is the creation of Mahaprabhu. He is the creator of Sankirtan. The only qualification he gives is to be more humble than a blade of grass. And for this reason, Haridas Thakur is Namacharya. He is the one who has exemplified and propagated the chanting of the holy names because he exemplified the humility that is required to chant the holy name. And therefore this pride is so dangerous. If we wish to chant, and I hope we wish to chant, if we wish to chant, we must see how Haridas Thakur chanted. With humility, with tolerance. This is the holy name, right? Not ecstatic dancing, not ecstatic singing, right? Not trendy mridanga players, right? I remember I heard one devotee was telling me, sorry, I don't want to blast kirtan culture or anything. Obviously, Kirtaniyas are doing great service for Krishna consciousness. I'm just sort of talking about some aspects of the culture that emerge, right? I remember one devotee came up to me and said, oh, have you heard of so-and-so? And then I said, oh, who's that? And said, oh, he's a famous mridanga player. And I was sort of thinking, Prabhu, I'm sure he's a great devotee. Like, why didn't you lead with that, Anyways, the rock star culture is completely contrary to what Harinam should be. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur. No fame, no respect, nothing. Forget about respect, disrespect. And then what do we see? Advaita Acharya. Sometimes when he'd perform the Shrad, there's a plate, the Shrad Patra, right? And on this plate, these are all the big remnants, right, from the Shrad. And on this plate, right, the person you give this plate to, you give it to the person of the most esteem, the person of the highest qualification, right? And so sometimes what would happen is Advaita Acharya, he would invite all the brāhmaṇas in the area. And all these brahmins, they would come, all of these different individuals, they would come and they would stay in his home, right, as he's performing the Shrad. And when the time came for him to give the Shrad Patra, all of the brahmins would think, what does Prabhupada say, $2 Brahmin? All these brahmins, they would wait there and they'd think, which one of us will get it, right? Oh, well, he's the oldest. Oh, but he comes from a Sarasvat Brahmin family and I come from this Brahmin. Like this, they would calculate, who will get it? And then Advaita Acharya, he would walk past all of them and they'd think, oh, okay, it's not me. I wonder which one will get it. He would walk past all of them, and then he would walk out his front door. Because sitting outside of his front door is Haridas Thakur. Because Haridas Thakur is not allowed to sit with all of these esteemed personalities. He's too degraded, too fallen. And Advaita Acharya would take this plate and he would give it to Thakur Haridas. And then Haridas Thakur would say, why are you giving this to me, right? Who am I to get this? And all the Brahmins would get upset. Did Advaita Acharya bring us here just to insult us? Right? He's brought us all here and then he's giving this plate to what? A mlech? A yavana? That's what they would say. And they'd start getting up, they'd start getting really angry, and they'd start leaving. And Haridas Thakur would say, oh, Advaita Acharya, you need to go back, all of your guests are leaving. All your guests are leaving. All of these esteemed personalities, they're going. Please go back, right? And Advaita Acharya would say, the benefit I get from giving this to you is 1,000,000 times what I would get from giving it to any one of these individuals. Then, of course, these Brahmins, it's described in one text that as they're walking away, they remember that Advaita Acharya, when he was younger, he did obeisances to the Durga deity, and the Durga Murti just disappeared. She didn't want to accept the pranams from this great personality, right? So she just disappeared. And then they remembered that, and they sort of thought, oh, wait a second, maybe we shouldn't offend this guy. And then they all went back into the house, right? But That's not the main point. Advaitacharya said this, all these karma kanda, all these karma kanda Brahmins, I won't get much benefit from giving this to them. But to you, Thakur Haridas, outcast, right? Lowest of the low, giving this to you, I get millions and millions more benefit. So sometimes people wonder, what is the social view of the Krishna consciousness movement? Sometimes people say, it's gone conservative, right? We are conservative, in the sense that we conserve the flow of pure bhakti into the world. But it is not a regressive movement. It is not a movement of reinforcing social hierarchies. It is not a movement of oppression. It is not a movement that is traditional in the systems of who can go where or anything like that. Our Krishna consciousness movement is not neutral to these topics either. We don't have a neutral position. It's not, oh, if you want to, you can. If you want to discriminate on caste, you can, right? No, unfortunately, or rather fortunately, we're stuck in one position. If somebody wants to know what is the social issue policy of the Krishna consciousness movement, it is Advaita Acharya taking the Shraddha Patra and giving it to Haridas Thakur. That is the position of the Krishna consciousness movement on social issues. That by the power of Harinam, we are all one big family. Sometimes people, they like to make fun of Western devotees. I mean, I also have a bit of an accent when I pronounce the Sanskrit. Not as much as some of the fully Western background devotees, but still. But sometimes we hear some Australian devotees have like a really thick accent, right? Sometimes, Prabhupada, right? Rathayatra, right? Rasalila. We hear all of these things, and sometimes devotees, they like to make fun of it. And it is a little bit sweet, it's a little bit charming, but I actually think, how glorious is it? Whenever I hear Sanskrit being really, really mangled, I think, how glorious is Srila Prabhupada, right? Srila Prabhupada. How glorious is Srila Prabhupada, right? That all of these people, they're coming and they're speaking these words about Krishna. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a glorious thing to hear the Sanskrit being pronounced in this way. Because this is the Krishna consciousness movement. This person is as much my brother, is as much my sister, is as much elevated in this Vedic culture as anyone who will pronounce it with the perfect pronunciation, right? This is the position of the Krishna consciousness movement, right? So much bodily consciousness is there. We see this with Haridas Thakur, his humility, his attachment to the holy name. So when we say Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur, we should think, it's not just an opportunity to say Ki Jai and get excited. It's something very deep. Because within that, he has revealed what the holy name is. Once Raghunath Das Goswami, he was going to Govardhan Prabhu's. Once Haridas Thakur was going to the house of Raghunath Das Goswami. Raghunath Das Goswami's father's name is Govardhan. Govardhan Prabhu, right? So he was going to the house of Govardhan Prabhu, right? And when he went there, of course, they accepted him, and they very much were happy to have the association of such a great sadhu. And at this time, when he was there were all these other great scholars who were invited. All these scholars were invited to stay in this home. And what were they doing? What scholars always do. They were debating, right? And when they saw Haridas Thakur, they said, oh, this guy, yeah, he's famous. He's famous. What's he famous for? He's famous for chanting. So let's debate the glories of the holy name. And so some of the scholars, they said, by chanting this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, all of your sinful activities are destroyed. And they're all saying, yeah. And then another scholar said, actually, destruction of sins, that is one thing. But by chanting this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, one attains liberation instantly. And they all thought, oh, actually, this is also a very good opinion. And like this, they're having a back and forth, they're having a debate. Some were saying destruction of sins, that is the glory of the holy name. The others were saying giving liberation, that is the glory of the holy name. Haridas Thakur, he listens and listens and listens, and then he says, actually, neither of these are the glories of the holy name. Just as when the sun is rising, when we see the sunrise, the first few rays of light, what do? They cast out the darkness. All the darkness is gone, right? We don't need to be afraid anymore. Darkness gives fear. Fear is dispelled, right? And once that fear is dispelled, then everyone comes out. And when they come out of their homes, they are then able to see the rise of the full sun in all of its beauty. In the same way, things like liberation, things like forgiveness of sins, they're the first rays of the sun. They are not the sun itself. This is just namabhas. Haridas Thakur, he says, by the dispelling of darkness, then we are able to see the sun in all of its full beauty. Things like forgiveness of all of our sins. Things like full liberation. They're simply clearing the way that we can have darshan of Shuddhanam, of the holy name. And we can think how desperately we want liberation. We can think how desperately we want our sins to be forgiven. And we can think that that is simply cleaning the floor for Harinam to appear. He said, Harinam is giving Krishna prem. That is the glory of Harinam. All of these other things are not the glories. We like to talk about a Jamal pastime. We like to talk about all of these things. And these things are important. We should understand Nam Tattva. But they are not the glories of the holy name. The glory of the holy name is that it gives us love for Krishna. And that it is Krishna himself. So in this way, Haridas Thakur, he makes the point. And then of course at this point, Gopal Chakravarti, one Brahmin, it's a famous story, right? He's very handsome. He's a very handsome young Brahmin, right? And he says, I don't know about that one. That's not true. How can you insult liberation in this way, right? How can you insult liberation in this way? How can you just dismiss it? If this is true, then I will cut. If this is not true, I will cut your nose off. Then Haridas Thakur says, forget about it. If this isn't true, I'll cut my own nose off. And then, of course, very famously, you know, everyone's, how can you say such blasphemy against such a great Vaishnav? And then, of course, we know Gopal Chakravarti. He gets leprosy and his nose falls off, right? Recently, actually, we were having a morning walk with Shubhag Swami Maharaj. And so we were all, like, congesting the pathway a little bit because we're all, like, there next to Maharaj, you know, trying to hear what Maharaj is saying, right? And then this one jogger came behind us and he started yelling. At Maharaj. Get out of the way, what are you doing, congesting it all? Some people are trying to run here. Maharaj is really simple. Maharaj is simple and sweet. He turned around and said, is he asking us to run with him? But then I turned around. It's one of the boys who was with me. And I said, his nose will fall off. Just you wait, his nose will fall off. Haridas Thakur, of course, was not offended. But this is the thing. Sometimes with Vaiṣṇava Parad, we think, they won't care, I know them, they're a relaxed person. It's not the Vaishnav that we have to be worried about with Vaiṣṇava Parad, it's Krishna, right? Who's going to, play got your nose with us, right? That's what's going to happen, right? That's what we need to be worried about. So, in this way, of course, he loses his nose. And then famously, you know, he goes and he prays for forgiveness. And then Mahaprabhu restores his body. And there's a temple there. I remember when I was on Navadvip Dham Parikrama. We went to that temple. You can go to the temple where his nose was restored. And it's said to be one of the best places. If you have outstanding Vaiṣṇava Parad, you can go there and really beg to Mahaprabhu to have all of your Vaiṣṇava Parads forgiven. So it was a nice place. Prabhupada used to go to that temple when he was a Grihastha. I was talking to one of the sannyasis who was living there. He was saying when he was a young brahmachari, he saw Prabhupada as a Grihastha. This sannyas is like 100 and something years old now, but anyways. So in this way, we see Haridas Thakur, right? So simple, so humble. If it's not true, I will cut my nose off. And no offense is taken, right? No offense is taken. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur. What is the position of this personality, right? What is the position of this personality? We know, of course, later on, because Advaitacharya, he hosted Haridas Thakur often. He gave him a cave, right? Shastras say that cave is non-different to Vaikuntha because of the chanting that Haridas Thakur did there, right? And as he was chanting, we know sometimes all temptations would come. You know, the prostitute came to try to tempt him, right? We know Maya Devi herself came, right? And Maya Devi herself came, and she tried to entice him. Haridas Thakur couldn't be bothered in the slightest. Instead, he gave her initiation. He initiated her into the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Now we have to think, what is the glories what are the glories of this Haridas Thakur? Right? Maya Devi herself was conquering, definitely me, and I'm sure a lot of us. Maya Devi herself was conquering everyone in this world. Haridas Thakur is initiating as a disciple. What are the glories of Haridas Thakur? Did he need to be born in a great jat? Did he need to have some big gotra in order to achieve this? No. Simply by the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, he is able to achieve these things. Now, Krishna's Kaviraj Thakur, he says, somebody might struggle to believe, why would Maya Devi want to receive initiation, right? Why would she wish to take shelter of a Vaishnavacharya? And he makes the point, forget about Maya Devi. The associates of Lord Ramchandra, they're all taking birth in Gaur Leela, right? The associates of Krishna, they're all taking birth in Gaur Leela. Forget about them, Krishna himself is taking birth in Gaur Leela, all for the same thing, for this Krishna Prem. For this Krishna Prem that is the glory of Harinam, right? Krishna himself is coming in the Gaur Leela in order to attain this Krishna Prem. Then why is it unbelievable that Maya Devi will want it as well? And what is the glory of this Krishna Prem? The glory of this Krishna Prem is that gotras, communities, personalities, these things don't matter anymore. All of the material distinctions, all of the material oppressions, all the material categories, they are washed away in the river of Krishna Prem that is emerging from Gauranga Mahaprabhu's heart. They are all washed away by the potency in Harinam. This is the glory of that Krishna Prem. In Haridas Thakur, he is very instrumental to its distribution. Why? We know very famously Mahaprabhu appears. And why does he appear? Who calls for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to appear? Advaita Acharya, right? And how does he call for this appearance? With Tulsi and Ganga water, right? So he's doing the worship of Shaligram Shila with Tulsi and Ganga water. And in this way, he's crying out, Gauranga, right? He's crying out, when will Lord Chaitanya appear? But Chaitanya Charitamrita says something very interesting. It says it wasn't just Advaita Acharya. It was Advaita Acharya calling out and Haridas Thakur chanting. It was Haridas Thakur's chanting of the holy name. Haridas Thakur is 35 years older than Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? It is Haridas Thakur's calling out, right? Chanting the holy name alongside Advaita Acharya's worship, right? Advaita Acharya, very socially respectable person, right? Except parents didn't like him because he brought their children to the Krishna consciousness movement. But in general, a respected person, right? And Haridas Thakur, alone in a cave, outcast. And Mahaprabhu appears for both of their desires. This is the position of Krishna consciousness. This is the position of the chanting of the holy name. And this is the official position of the Krishna consciousness movement. On the questions of caste, on the questions of whether somebody is from a Western background or an Indian background or a Malaysian background or a whatever else you can throw in there. This is the official position. I'll wrap up on this point. Going on and on and on. So we see in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's quite a few verses that discuss this. In fact, Mahaprabhu at one point, he says, Nicha jati nohe Krishna bhojone joggo, shotkul bipro nohe bhojoner joggo. Right? That person who is Nicha jati. Nicha jati means low caste. Nohe Krishna bhojane joggo. They are not disqualified from Krishna bhajan. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's direct words. But what does he say? Shotkul Vipro, right? A Satkul Vipra. What is that? Pakka, Saraswat Brahmin, right? Very, very high. Nohe bhojoner joggo. They are disqualified from bhajan. It's heavy. Prabhupada says that what we should understand this to mean is that it doesn't just by being a Brahmin, they are not qualified, right? But Mahaprabhu's direct words are heavier. Prabhupada sort of gives the internal meaning. But Mahaprabhu doesn't even want to create the single bit of doubt about this caste consciousness. So he actually says the person, the Satkul Vipra, the person from the Satkuls, the high families, they are disqualified from practicing bhakti. It's pretty heavy stuff, right? Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So in this way, Mahaprabhu has said this. And then of course we know, and then I will wrap up in this point, I just made 3 minutes, so that's fine. And then we see Haridas Thakur, right? In his whole pastimes, he is embodying this principle. At the very beginning of Mahaprabhu's birth, already there's Haridas Thakur, praying and praying and praying, chanting the holy name, awaiting for the point when Mahaprabhu will appear, right? But then at one point, Mahaprabhu also has to end his pastimes. And so we see one morning, Haridas Thakur, he's not taking prasad. And everyone's concerned. He's an old man now. Again, 35 years older than Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu began Sankirtan movement around 16, so 15, 16. So it been like around 50, 60 throughout all these pastimes. Just when we think of his beatings, he wasn't like a young man like everyone else. There was like a substantial, he was like 50, 60, 70 throughout all these pastimes, right? So he's there and he's not taking prasad. And so the associates, they ask him, they say, why aren't you taking prasad? And he says, how can I eat if I haven't finished my rounds yet? And then they're confused. Haridas Thakur? Behind on his rounds? What? Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur? And they say, what's wrong? Mahaprabhu asks him, what's wrong? Right? We should chant in this way. We should chant in the way that if our rounds are bad, people go up to us and they say, what's wrong? Are you all right? Is everything all right in your life? I know in my experience, if I'm chanting really good rounds, then people are like, is everything all right? Are you okay? So in this way, we should be chanting. So in this way, Mahaprabhu asks. And then Haridas Thakur, who was the person who called for Mahaprabhu to appear, Haridas Thakur, he says, I know your pastimes are coming to an end. I do not wish to see that. Please give me one boon, only one boon. And that boon is that I can pass away before you conclude your pastimes. Haridas Thakur, who was beaten to the point of death several times, who was rejected by society, who was never allowed into a single home, who wasn't allowed to go into the temple that he built. This Haridas Thakur never once said, Mahaprabhu, can you give me a boon to go inside? Can you give me a boon to be protected? The first time he begged something from Mahaprabhu, besides Mahaprabhu's appearance, is saying, I don't want to see your disappearance. Never let there be another day where my eyes are not able to have darshan of you. This is the first thing that he begs for, no matter how much suffering he's had. That is not suffering. What is suffering is not to be able to have the association of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is Haridas Thakur's mood. And in this way he says, please allow it that I may leave my body. Please allow this. And Mahaprabhu grants his wish. And so then Haridas Thakur, he begins to manifest his Antya Leela, his disappearance. And in his final moments, what does he say? What's the thing he says in his final moments? Does anyone know? Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Shri Krishna Chaitanya. He says the name of Gauranga Mahaprabhu. And I like to make the point, what was he chanting his whole life? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This Haridas Thakur, who is so attached, 3 lakhs of Hare Krishna Maha Mantra every single day, right? He was that attached to the name of Krishna. And yet whose name does he chant as he concludes his life? The name of Gauranga Mahaprabhu. We can quote all sorts of shastric pramans from Bhagavatam, from Chaitanya Upanishad. We can quote all these pramans that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself. But that is the only praman we need. That Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself, because that person who lived his whole life only for Krishna Nam spoke the name of Gauranga Mahaprabhu as he concluded his life. That is the only praman we need. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not an avatar of Krishna. He is not an expansion of Krishna. He is not a part of Krishna. He is Krishna entirely directly. Otherwise, Haridas Thakur would not have been satisfied chanting his name as he concludes his pastimes. And in this way, Haridas Thakur passes away. And then what does Mahaprabhu do? He takes that body. We know Vedic culture, the dead bodies, they're not clean. You have to purify yourself and purify yourself after touching a dead body, right? This body that when it was considered alive was considered the most dirty of bodies. The Hindus didn't want anything to do with him. Lech, Yavan, low caste. The Muslims didn't want anything to do with him either. Kafir, apostate. This body, when it was alive, was seen as an object of violence and hatred, was seen as the most disgusting body by all of material society when it was alive. And now this body is considered dead. And what does Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu do with that body? He picks it up and dances with it. This is the position of Krishna consciousness. This is the position of being a Vaishnava. And this is the perspective of Krishna consciousness on social designations. That we can dance with the body of such a degraded, lowly person because of their engagement in Krishna consciousness. This is the standard of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is our position. What is our view on caste? What is our view on social issues? Our view is Advaita Acharya giving the Shraddha Patra to Haridas Thakur. Our view is Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu weeping and crying and dancing with the body of Haridas Thakur. And so if we ever wish to get, Brahmin this, Brahmin that, we should be disgusted that the thought even enters into our head, because it did not enter into the head of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Anyways, I've gone over time, please forgive me. We're all late to breakfast. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.